and welcome back to another episode of the Italy Travel Podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mallour.
And today we're talking about Pompeii.
Yes, we are. It's been on the list for a while, and we recently went on a tour of Pompeii, like 2.5 months ago now. And since then, it's been on the list, but we had to make our way through, well, everywhere else first.
Yeah, and it also feels quite daunting in a way to talk about Pompeii. We're not going to get too much into the history because we are not historians. It is dense, meaning there's just so much history there. There's so many pieces of the park that could be talked about that it just feels a little overwhelming. So we've decided to take it in bite-sized pieces and just kind of talk about the general getting there, getting around, the vibes, things like that.
Things that you as a tourist might want to know, and then you get to keep a lot of the history for when you're there and when you are like potentially booking a tour, or if you're just, polishing up on your Pompeii history, if you brought a guidebook, or if you're, I think there are some, I think you listened to like one of those Yale lecture series on Pompeii.
I'm going to see if it's still available. I think they took down some of them, but there's a free Yale lectures, and one of them is Pompeii Archeology that I watched years and years ago and have forgotten almost all of it now, but it was fascinating at the time. And I'm also going to put in the description a super helpful sort of online pamphlet, which I'm sure you can print out if you want to. I think it's a PDF from the Pompeii Archeological Park website itself, which has helpful descriptions of basically every house and building and everything in the site of Pompeii.
Nice. That'll actually be very helpful, I think.
Yeah. And before we get into it, as always, we want to thank you all so much for following and leaving reviews, commenting. We appreciate it so much. If you enjoy this podcast, you can follow and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you're listening to this podcast. And a big old thank you to Ariel and Austin, our Rigatoni tier members on Patreon. If you want to check out our Patreon, you can do so at patreon.com/the Italy Travel Podcast, and you can join the chat there for free. You can also find articles written by myself and Nathaniel on onlyabag.com about Italy, life here, things to do. And you can also contact us there as well.
Thank you all again so much for your support and your listening.
Thank you so much.
So to kick things off, I first wanted to say thank you to a commenter on a episode who actually commented, I think this morning. This is on Tuesday before this episode comes out on Wednesday. And they commented mentioning a discrepancy in the date of the eruption of Vesuvius. Because while it has long been considered that the eruption happened on August 24th of 79 CE, there have been some recent findings that do challenge this. Recent as of, I think, 1990 is when some of the first sort of discrepancies or maybe challenges to this date actually started. So I wanted to say a massive thank you to the commenter. I thought how fortuitous it was that on the week we were going to talk about Pompeii, we got a question on a previous episode about Pompeii. And because it is such a puzzle, it is such a big question mark in an event that, well, I was going to say it's well known. I mean, it's well researched, and it kind of isn't as part of the issue. Like, we know a lot about it, and then we also know frightfully little about it in other cases.
Mysterious.
It's still mysterious. So
Pompeii has just been top of mind for people, I feel.
It has been top of mind for people. There's actually a Disney Plus TV show with Tom Hiddleston coming out. I know it's coming out. It has Tom Hiddleston, and it's supposed to be kind of a dive into Pompeii, with I'm not entirely sure, honestly.
Like a narration of history by a famous person.
And then there's they're talking to archaeologists, and they're talking to I was gonna say paleontologists, anthropologists, trying to figure out what happened, when did it happen, did people have a warning, et cetera, et cetera. It could be interesting. I don't know. I have not seen it yet, but it just seems top of mind. And so we figured, with it being top of mind, and since we got a comment, it might be kind of fun to start off with the big question around, or why is there a question around the date of the eruption if it was recorded so clearly? Yeah. And so we figured we'd start with that. Basically, August 24th of 79. I was going to say 2079. I'm like, wait, what? Of 79 is the date. This is when it happened. That's when Pliny recalled it happening. That's when he lost his uncle, Pliny the Elder, who's also sort of a historian himself, not sort of a historian himself, and had went to rescue a friend, and sort of, I guess, like ironically sad, I guess, but the same winds he took there, like he sailed from what is today a frazione of Bacoli, which is like a neighborhood of Bacoli, which is kind of a town to the west of Naples.
Okay.
And back then it was called Misenum. I'm always adding extra letters where they shouldn't be. And he essentially just sailed over, but that same wind that brought him there prevented any ships from leaving. So a lot of the people who did escape the Pompeii went to the sea to sail away and found that they basically couldn't without oars. And even with oars, you're not really getting that far. I mean,
I had always heard that people went to the beaches, essentially went to the shore, and they couldn't get away. And I never really thought about why that was. Just the wind
pushing them back, basically.
Wow.
And it's a fascinating sort of the ultimate. There was something I read recently, it had nothing to do with Pompeii, but it was talking about the change of the sea and like how in ancient times a sea was essentially the roadway. Like that's just how you went anywhere. You would go to your boat on the water and you go somewhere. And which makes sense, especially if you see sort of, I mean, even like Italy without the Roman roads, it is a pretty difficult place to traverse in terms of like, it's very mountainous, it's very rocky, it's very hilly. Some places are flat, but not everywhere. So the sea does become a much easier way to go. Like, I mean, crossing the Alps, it's like, no, we're just going to sail there. It takes no time at all. I'm not crossing the Alps, melting boulders with vinegar. So there's it basically,
that?
I believe it was Hannibal.
Yeah.
And I think so there's an idea that like, it's almost like, not really, it's a terrible explanation, but it's almost like when there's a volcano, you obviously go to your car and get in your car. And there's a lot of people like, fleeing to the sea because like, yeah, that's where the ships are going to be. Somebody's going to pick us up.
That's your way out whenever you need to go somewhere.
Exactly. They've already sent word that we need to the Roman army that we need to get out of here. So we're good if we go to the sea. And that is obviously the ultimate downfall. Ironically, had they gone north to Naples, it might have been more okay, depending when, but that's neither here nor there. So the date, August 24th, was thrown into question. And I think, I mean, like anything else is you have these things where are immovable, like concrete facts, and then you think, wait a second, why don't we challenge that fact? And it started, the challenge, I think in 1990, the challenge started mainly by other Italian archaeologists. They were finding, one, the clothing that people were wearing when they were making these casts, where they realized it was heavier clothing than you would expect from somebody who died in August. While there have definitely been some temperature changes over the last 2,000 years, August has been historically very hot in Italy, as written by everybody who's ever written about Italy in August ever in history. So it seems unlikely, but they're like, okay, maybe it's a cold morning, that's fine. Or not cold morning, cold, a couple of days, that's fine. I think that we've mentioned on that previous podcast as well, that episode, that a lot of the food they found, chestnuts, for example, pomegranates, these are things that would have been found in autumn. Other historians kind of debate that, saying yes, but keep in mind, and we'll talk about this a little later, Pompeii was resettled after the volcano of 79. So,
which I had no idea until Nathaniel just told me moments ago before we started recording. That's wild. I had no idea.
And actually, it's which kind of makes sense, right? We talked about this even slightly with Pestrum. Even though there have been kind of disasters over the history of Pestrum, nothing as big as the eruption of Vesuvius, but certainly like major floodings and things like that, people will still kind of go back because it's your home, obviously. And even with Pompeii, people went back like not that long later. I think even Pliny the Younger went to find his uncle only a few days later when they found his body.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like people pretty much immediately returned. It was like, oh, we should go see what's left of our house kind of thing.
Yeah. Which makes sense. But in my mind, I think of it all just being completely covered to the point of being like a plane almost.
Exactly.
Meaning like a flat surface.
Like a flat surface. And I think it was within a few days, I know that a lot of the looting started because a lot of the villas that, or not even villas, I mean, villas for sure, and also the temples and things, the bigger buildings, you could see where the roofs, you could see where the entrances were. So you just busted through, dropped down, and started looting. Some of it for things to resell, and some of it just for building supplies, which, as we've talked about again in Pestrum, it has been looted many times for building supplies. So this, but this discovery of pomegranates, of chestnuts, added a lot of kind of question marks, because these could have just easily been from people that fall, or even 20 years later, 30 years later, basically harvesting the nuts and harvesting the pomegranates and selling them. So
those things, which I thought were evidence of the eruption being later, potentially in October, something like that, because they're autumn foods,
Yeah.
right? So were those found under any sort of ash or anything? Like how?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, well, that's part of the difficulty thing. The difficult because while the eruption is what we all consider 79 AD, it actually, or CE, if you will, it actually erupted multiple times. I think in the late 400s, especially, and finally in 512
So
was
those could have been covered from another
from
eruption.
another eruption, and the same sort of
Okay.
effect: a lack of oxygen, lack of moisture. It would have dehydrated. It would have been preserved, and we would have found it today.
Interesting.
Have been other sort of hints, if you will. One was a coin that was minted, and it was in honor of an emperor's recent, I think Titus's recent military prowess,
Okay.
military success. However, it was when it was found, they're like, "Oh, this was minted in September, so this can't, it could," and it was found in Pompeii in a woman's purse or her coin purse, and they're like this, so it could not have been in August if this was minted in September. However, later findings revealed that it was sort of identified, and it was printed in early August, and it's like a wild coincidence, but it's not remotely impossible for it
Right.
to have been minted and then especially because Pompeii was just constantly trading back and forth with its northern neighbors, southern neighbors, that it would have
Of
had,
course.
somebody would be like, hey, have some fresh money from the ATM kind of thing. So there are these like little few things. One is also just the prevailing winds. Typically June, July, August, it is more east to west. And as it gets later in the year, it goes more north to south,
The direction of the wind.
the direction of the wind. And so
Okay.
knowing how that the flow, the ash and the smoke and the hot gases all kind of flowed south towards Salerno you know, rather than towards open ocean, not open ocean, but it would have been Naples and a bit just the Gulf there.
Okay.
They think it was later.
Okay.
It's this kind of interesting question. And arguably, if you're listening, you're like, okay, that's fascinating, but why does it matter? It arguably doesn't. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Because we know the year. And
We know the
we know
year.
I mean, it's between August and October is
Exactly.
when it erupted of
or
79.
no, November, but yeah.
Okay.
And some people take the November date out completely. They're like, that would have been way too late. Again, though, they found wine fermenting in vats, and those vats we are pretty sure was from Pompeii, like of the height of Pompeii, because they were incredibly well known for their wine. Again, trading it all the way up to Provence or even to Spain. So they're like, I mean, this is a major wine culture. It would have been fermenting. You probably don't ferment wine for that long. I don't know anything about wine, but they assume it was from that year. So they're like, it would have had to been picked and fermented, and August is very early to pick grapes.
Right.
So there are a few like little bits and bobs.
Plus, we have the writings of Pliny the Younger, right? And those were from how many years later, did you say?
It's debatable, but between 25 and 30.
Okay. And then those were copied. And some of not translations, some of the copies say that it was like something like 9 days before the something something, and people think that means August the 24th, right? But then other copies say 9 days before the beginning of November, or so many days before the beginning of November. So between the different copyings, something was lost in there
Exactly.
and kind of misinterpreted.
And that's what I've found as well. It looks like nobody is, or no like historian or archaeologist thinks that Pliny the Younger was wrong. It was
Right.
more just over the last 1500 years. I mean, not the last, but from when he wrote it for the next 1500 years, when it was then printed like at an actual press, it would have been potentially altered.
Yeah, something was mistaken in there.
Exactly. So it's a fascinating thing. The actual archaeological site of Pompeii themselves rejects any date that isn't August 24th, which is fascinating because it is a lot of then archaeologists in Italy who are the ones trying to figure out, like, again, when did it happen? Like what day? And again, as I mentioned just mere moments ago, it arguably does not matter. I think everybody sort of agrees that it would be interesting to know, and it's a really interesting puzzle, and it's like a missing piece of this larger puzzle. But I could not find anything where somebody was saying it matters because this, it matters
Right.
because it would have changed X, Y, Z. It seems like it's just more, it's such a, that it's that annoying missing thing that you're like, wait, if it's not then and it's some other time, then how does that change the rest of this? Like, would they have fled in a different direction? Because as we will talk about, I think we know how many people were found in Pompeii, and It's kind of though a question of how many people lived in Pompeii when it erupted. Most estimates, some early estimates put it at 20,000. More recent estimates put it about 11,000 based on household numbers.
Oh,
But that doesn't include people who are visiting the city. That doesn't include
okay.
people who were, long-term staying. It just includes people who, it seems like, owned houses and there was a census.
Okay.
And then also then it does include people, and the reason this is, again, like they would have fled out of the city going south or north and died somewhere else. So it's a question of like, oh, where are there surviving families of Pompeii? Arguably, yes, of course. There's so many people, they would have all fled in different directions. But then again, we don't know where else they would have fled to.
Right. That was something I found really interesting whenever we went. We took a tour this time when we went to Pompeii. And something that our tour guide, Francesco, was saying is that people, obviously, we all know people fled, of course. And a lot of those people ended up dying, and we will never know where they are. They are now under modern cities. And we just will never really have a firm number of how many people died and where they went. There's no way of knowing.
Exactly. Or how many people were in there to begin with. So
Right.
it's not like
Or
you
how
can
many
do
people
subtraction.
escaped necessarily.
Or how many people escaped. And it's, I think people often mention like, oh, you can do like genetic testing, but it doesn't really work like that. It's not like, that's the Pompeii gene.
Right.
So I don't think you can do that and then find out anything. It's
Because there was also a lot of travel too between Naples and Pompeii and Herculaneum. I mean, Herculaneum is very close to Pompeii, but people did move around.
well, also not just that, but they found dates in Pompeii, which that of all these fruits and vegetables they found, dates would be the only thing not able to grow there. So they know at least there was some trade happening with arguably North Africa or somewhere in the Levant, as they called it. So it's kind of like where this could have been tons of people visiting, could be
Right.
all sorts of people who were, just passing through or trading or this and that. So,
Having a little vacay.
well, that was the other big thing, having a little vacation. So that it was just now that we're firmly into this episode, I didn't want to completely take it away with that. But I thought it was fascinating just because it is still a major question around Pompeii is when did it erupt? And if you go to the site, though, and I assume you will if you're going to visit and if you're listening to this episode, they will tell you August 24th of 79. So you can use that as a good, just, I don't know, measuring stick, as a good assumption.
Yeah.
If
I would
that
say
makes
obviously trust your tour guides because the tour guides in Pompeii are highly educated and obviously, but they know so much information and people are specialized to obviously talk about it. So they know what they're talking about, but this just kind of adds like an interesting mystery, you know?
Yeah. I thought so too. So now that we've talked about when it erupted, I think that might really be one of the only really historical things we'll talk about. The rest of this will be about today's episode, and Fridays will be about more usable things as a tourist, I think.
Yes.
So how would you like to start?
I think we should give this is our second impressions of Pompeii because we went for the second time.
We did, yes.
So do you want to talk about kind of what your thoughts are on Pompeii? How you feel there?
So the first time we went, if I may also give a little bit of background,
Yeah.
I was both very impressed with Pompeii itself and underwhelmed with everything else about it, if that makes sense.
What do you mean?
Well, I think we had been to other sort of, not necessarily archaeological sites, but tourism sites
Okay.
in Italy at that point. And they were all really well done, it felt like. And Pompeii was the first that kind of felt a little less well done, like a little bit more, we threw this together. And I think, and actually, so when I was looking into this, I was a bit curious because I was like, was it just my perception? And that was coming from somebody who just like, when I say we went to play, it was like we went to these museums in Rome and we'd gone already to, I'd already traveled to France and stuff. So it was like, yeah, the Louvre has a really nice layout and a really
Right.
nice map. Don't know why I'm comparing the Louvre to Pompeii, but it is what it is. And in 2010, I believe, is actually when the roof collapsed of it was like the Villa of the Gladiators.
Okay.
And that sort of led to this big sort of corruption scandal of like, where's this money been going? Because we've been pumping money into this. It's disappeared. A lot of people associated with Pompeii saying, yeah, this is literally a leaky sieve. Like you can pump as much money as you want, but like every day we are losing parts of Pompeii. And the roof collapsed mainly due to rainfall and improper drainage. And even though you couldn't ever go inside this building, you could see it from the outside, and then it kind of got partially destroyed. So starting from there, is an investigation. I think in 2014 they finalized plan and money for it of like, how are we going to preserve, how are we going to approach this from a different angle? Because I think in 1999, I believe is what it was, there was a moratorium on new excavations,
Okay.
mainly to prevent this happening constantly.
Because they're protected as long as they're sealed
As long as they're sealed.
in like the earth,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. And this was lifted in 2017, I believe. So, and it was lifted, and this is kind of why, like, we've mentioned this before, in the last like 5-7 years or so, every 6 months or whatever it is, there's an article about, oh, we just found a new villa or a new thermal, bath or, whatever it is in Pompeii. There's always something kind of interesting coming out. And why you didn't hear about it for like 20 something years, it's because it was not allowed to happen. So my first impressions having gone back then, and we went in 2015, so it would have just been the start of like, let's use some money to actually preserve the place and fix it up and make it more approachable and make it more more accessible, I think is the best way to put it. At the same time, I very much enjoyed the first time we went. It was beautiful. It was raining. It was quiet. And you and I are not the only ones who have gone, obviously, when it's been raining. But from comments online and stuff, I find that other people, their best time was off-season, rainy day. No one is there. I mean, some people are there, but very few people are there. And it's very much like you have the place to yourself.
Right.
And as we'll mention, I think, in a bit, it's not like Pestrum is beautiful. We've talked about Pestrum before on this podcast. It does require some imagination to imagine how the town would have looked.
Yes.
Other places, even in Rome, there's some sort of like, oh yeah, these are the ruins, and they're a bit more ruined than ruins. The terrible play on words, but they're a little bit more dilapidated than what Pompeii is offering, which is that takes very little imagination to imagine how life would have been.
Yeah,
if that makes
so
sense.
much of it was preserved.
And so I think walking around that first time was mind-opening because I didn't realize how much of it was between, obviously people talk about the crosswalks a lot and the places with the pots selling food and things like that. You're just like, oh, even the sidewalks, and the sidewalks, but also this sort of the street names and things like that, arrows pointing this way and that way. It very much feels like we haven't come that far, if that makes sense. I mean, we really haven't, but no, I think that was my first impression, was kind of blown away by how much you think everything now is different.
Right.
And you look back then and you realize it's arguably some advances, but you can still see a lot of the lead piping from the aqueduct for the water. You could see a lot of the old fountains, and you realize that, oh, it hasn't gone like that far. What was your first impressions?
My first impressions, I think a lot like you. I knew about Pompeii roughly, but I, like you, didn't really realize just how much of it is still there. And whenever I just walking around, I don't think I knew how I was going to feel. I think I was just like, oh, museum. I mean, I love museums, but you look at a pretty thing and then you move to the next thing.
Yes.
Where in Pompeii, you are physically in the place that people were, 2,000 years ago, and you can see their homes and the fast food shop and cross the crosswalk just like they did and walk down the street. And you are just physically being in the same place as people that long ago and seeing a lot of what was still there, rather than like you're saying in Pestrum, where you can still see the floors and the kind of layout of a house, but the walls still stand and there are paintings and you can see what people, looked like. And it's just, I mean, and there are mosaics. There's a mosaic of a dog on a leash, and it's just, of course, people are always people. But I think until you're in that space, it's hard. It was hard for me to imagine that. And being there, especially in the rain, when it was really quiet, it was just very, very magical.
Agreed. And I think for me, it plays into the Pompeii is a hard, when we talk about Italy and you talk about where you have to visit. And I think I've always been big on if you're coming to Italy for the first time ever and you have very limited time, it's the 3-city trip of Rome, Florence, Venice. It's the 3 sides of Italy. It's very much unlike anywhere else in the world, those 3 cities. So I think you get a pretty good feeling of what Italy is, quote unquote, or what historic Italy might have been, while also not feeling like you left anything out. that said, when people talk about Pompeii, it's always hard to give them one thing that's like, you should see Pompeii because of this.
Right.
And I mean, because it's old, but it's like, it's Italy. It's all old. It's not even like the oldest city necessarily. It's very well preserved. And there are some parts of, Rome that are very well preserved. So I think for me, it's hard to, like, when I do recommend it to someone, it almost feels ridiculous because it's like, until you're there, I guess. And then I'm just like, well, the HVAC, right? The heating and cooling is just mind-boggling.
That's something that we learned this time, right? Did you know that before we traveled there this time?
I did not, because I think we also we didn't like see that area when we first went.
We'll talk about it more, I think, in the next episode, but we highly recommend that you take a tour if you can, like with a guide, because there is so much to see. And if you don't have someone telling you what things are, you might miss a special
100%.
part, And so, so we learned that there in the communal baths, they had, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the frigidarium and then the tepidarium. And
they pumped like cool water and air right into the frigidarium. So it's the Frigidaire, the refrigerated area. And then they had the tepidarium, which is, the place that prepares you for moving. There's just the same way you would do in a modern spa, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only been to a spa one time, but you move from like the cold to the warm to the hot so that your body does the right sort of thing for wellness, And so they had the tepidarium before the calidarium. And you can see today the raised floors, and I don't know if you can see within the wall, but the wall is also, spaced apart. It's double.
It's like double paned wall.
Yeah, it's like a double glazed window. So it's a double paned wall. And they would put warm air going through all of that to heat the room. It's just absolutely insane.
And actually one of the things I had read is that after the earthquake in 62, which sort of was a bit of a warning that very few people took.
And sadly, quick note, several people were rebuilding their homes and doing renovations on their homes from that earthquake whenever Vesuvius erupted in 79.
Well, that's the thing. So this whole bath system, this bath complex you can visit today, is built basically, houses were destroyed on the 62 earthquake. And one of the reasons they being archaeologists and stuff, know that Pompeii was on more of an upswing than a downswing. Usually, I think Stabia, after the 62 earthquake, kind of went worse, if that makes sense. They didn't really have the money to rebuild, and they weren't necessarily in a place where they could get a lot of funding to do so. Stabia being just slightly south of Pompeii, which you can visit today. However, Pompeii did, and they built this entire bath complex on the houses that were destroyed. We think I'm not an archaeologist. The archaeologists think the houses were either totally or fairly destroyed during the earthquake, and so it's easier just to clear it all out and then build a state-of-the-art bath complex instead, which is a phenomenal use of funds if it's a communal bath, I think. I mean, not as good as like a house, but like it's up there.
I mean, keeps people clean. That's good.
Or at least toasty and cool, depending on where you need to be.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm thinking like in the middle of summer, I'd hang out in the frigidarium with everybody else.
Yeah.
It sounds like a good place, especially these days. So that I thought was just fascinating. Just those are the very small things about it for me that is just mind-boggling, because it does sort of show that we haven't come that far. And
it's like I think we all know, if you've learned anything about Pompeii, you might know that they had, fast food, crosswalks, sidewalks. They lived just like normal people are living today, except that we have cars and the internet, But until, at least for me, like I've said, it was almost impossible for me to really feel that until I went there. And maybe you all can, but I just hadn't really felt it in my bones until we were there. And not that you can, put yourself 100% in the place of someone back in the 70s. but
either 70s, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just amazing to be able to be in the same space.
Which is all to say, I think, when people say, why should I go to Pompeii, or is it really worth going to Pompeii? It very much is, even if it's just for a moment of not like maybe self-realization, or just sort of a moment of realizing like how much bigger the world is, I think, than we thought, in a certain sense, if that makes sense.
I think there's something too, and this is maybe a little bit woo-woo of me to say, but I think if you're someone who, the same way some people can enter a church and you can feel some sort of energy around it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But if you're somebody who can feel sort of reverent in certain spaces, I think that's something that I have felt in Pompeii, especially whenever I'm able to find a quiet moment, which luckily we have been able to the 2 times we visited. It wasn't super crowded with people. There's just a sort of calm, peaceful
Absolutely.
which is not
Absolutely.
to say, obviously, that all of these people who died catastrophically,
Yeah.
that's not peaceful, but you can feel almost a little low-lying energy
Yeah.
of the city.
Yeah.
Not physically, but you can imagine it, you know?
There's also, I think, like I said, the first time we went was kind of raining, and then the second time we went, it was a beautiful day. But it was also really lovely because it was poppies were in full bloom, and a lot of the wheat was just starting to change from green to gold. So a lot of like that empty houses and empty spots and empty just areas, it was just these fields of wheat and poppies. And there's, I don't know, there's a really part of it is I've seen The Gladiator, and I think everyone who's seen The Gladiator has that scene where he's running his fingers through the wheat. He being the fellow from Australia whose name completely eludes me in this moment.
Russell Crowe?
Russell Crowe, thank you.
Is he Australian?
I believe he is.
Okay.
I believe he is.
That famous Australian gladiator.
I know.
Russell Crowe.
I mean, that's exactly how I remember him. And no, but there's that moment too. It's just you're standing in a I don't know, in a place that is just as the wheat shakes and it sort of reverberates, and you're just like, this nothing has changed.
Speaking of the Gladiator and also thinking about the World Cup, did we say a quick shout out, congratulations to Spain? But I learned today, as I was just sort of flipping through interesting information about Pompeii, there is, I think it's called the Osteria of the Gladiator, which was it was a couple of houses, I think, put together, as well as a vineyard and I think a restaurant. And people would go there. It was right near the stadium, I guess, in Pompeii.
Amphitheater?
The amphitheater, thank you. And people would go there after a performance, before a performance, grab a quick bite. And that's just one of the other things that, you know, shows we haven't changed.
Oh, no, not
We're
at all.
still going to the pub after the play, you know?
This is neither here nor there. You said pub after play, and I apologize. I hope this does not take too long of a turnaround. But so there are the tabernae, which is where we get the word tabernacle and also tavern from. And it would have been apparently back in ancient Roman time, if you were on a Roman road, you had to offer a place to stay for anybody along the road, a traveler along the road.
Cool.
That was like part of the deal, apparently. But it also created the sort of industry of hotels along this route. And some of these places did end up turning into full-on cities, like Mondragone, which is just north of Naples, for example, is one of these. It's near Caserta.
Okay.
It literally started as a place that had wine, ham, cheese, and good reviews, and like more people
Amazing.
started creating it. But near Tabernae, which would be these little places, there was often, and I wish I could remember the name of it, it was a seedy version of it. It was just known as like, so it would be like the hotel would pop up, and then next to it would be the seedy hotel, and it would
my
be like
gosh.
known for the hangouts of thieves and prostitutes. And I thought, amazing, first off, phenomenal. And that like, I don't know, anytime you watch those like movies that are supposed to be back in the day or whatever, it was like, we need to go and, you know, I don't know, find out where so-and-so has been hiding. So we're just going to go to the seedy bar in town. I'm like, how would they know? And now I'm like, oh, because that was the industry. It's the seedy bar. And then
There was the hotel, the motel, the Holiday Inn.
Yeah, I love it. So I just thought that was you were talking about how far we've come. And it's like, oh, this industry has been around for not the
Yes.
industry of seedy dive bars, but the idea that even, I mean, obviously back then, but there would have been like okay, not everybody can be at the same spot. So you have to have like the sort of, this is cheaper drinks. And we're less, you know, sort of caring about what your profession might be in terms of
Scrupulous.
less scrupulous. There we go. But these were found just near the Tabernae, and I did look it up. They're called Cauponae, Cauponae. They're also found
And those
in
are the
Pompeii.
less scrupulous ones?
Less scrupulous, a little
Okay.
more disreputable. And they've been found with graffiti, even in Pompeii, like on the walls. And
So
it's
cool.
just kind of like again, I mean, it may be not, because it might be a sign of like classism, for example. So a little less cool on that.
yeah, true.
But it also seems more of like there had to have been something pop up for people who were traveling who didn't have as much money.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have something that has cheaper rooms, but if it has cheaper rooms, it might be like not as, I don't know, like you have next door, you have everybody who's spending 200, I don't know, doubloons a night. That is definitely not, I could have gone with any other word.
It's amazing.
And then you have people who can only afford 10 doubloons a night. So
Yeah. Or whatever the local currency was.
probably not a doubloon, if I'm being honest. But I thought that was fascinating. Just
That's
the
amazing.
again, that's sort of like, I don't know. I think on a very personal level, I like this idea of how far we haven't come in certain senses. Like we think everything is new, but then we realize like how much graffiti and just sort of like constant little bickering fights you see on the walls of Pompeii that have been like then kept and or preserved, and some of them transported to Naples, to the Archeological Museum there. And you realize like if these people had Twitter, that would be insane.
Oh yeah,
like it's the same.
They were just trash talking people on walls.
Constant trash talking. So like it's just they
writing
just,
their names like Hercules was here.
yeah,
you know?
which is a little less trash talking. It's a little more just
No, but that's the same thing we do today, and it's like,
oh yes,
it's
yeah.
like around the town where we live, people will have like this person and this person in love forever.
Oh, exactly.
And that's on the walls, you know.
But it's so that for me is just fascinating. Like 2,000 years, and it really is just like if technology were slightly better, it'd be the same people just 2,000 years later, kind of thing. And to me, it's fascinating. Obviously, for you, some of you listening, it's probably like, yes, that is just how people work. This is not a discovery. But for that being said, if I were to recommend who would visit Pompeii, I would honestly say pretty much everybody. Because I think everybody can kind of take something else from it. Some of you honestly might find it super boring. That could depend on tour guide. That could depend on not having a tour guide. Even the tour guide we had, he's fantastic. And he mentioned that he once was an archaeologist there in Pompeii before becoming a tour guide. And when he started, he would like give these very dry, very sort of methodical tours. And he's like, it was okay, but people didn't really like connect with it as much as when he started like trying to find the stories of the people and like, trying to explain like here's how what you might connect to, and then he realized that people were into it when they could see themselves in that place, or they can be like, oh my god, I do the same thing. So I think that's, I don't know, for me that was the big moment of sort of realization, was like, oh yeah, it is about, I mean, that makes it seem like I only realized these were people when I thought I could be a person there. But I think that was a big moment too, where I realized that some of you might not have a great experience because you're like, it was just hot and boring. I didn't enjoy it.
I mean, there's definitely something to be said about the human connection that you can have over a 2,000 year period with people who don't exist anymore, versus just sort of seeing, oh, that's a house, that's the shell of a thing, oh, that's a painting on the wall. But when you can feel the connection to people, I think it changes your experience entirely.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, that was the big part.
Yeah. It's amazing. And you can obviously, if you've been to Pompeii, you probably know a lot of information about it, but that's all to say that I think people can keep going again and again and again and always finding something new. I mean, literally, because they are excavating more and more, but it's so big, y'all. And there's so much to see. I would love to go several more times. There's just always something new and interesting to learn about it.
There is. And while you mentioned they are excavating, something actually our tour guide told us, and something that I then found on, well, I think their website and a few other websites reference this, is that they are excavating, but more of the focus and energy is being put on conservation and preservation.
Yes.
And trying to, I mean, even on that level, like they're sort of re-excavating places they've already excavated and finding new things lower down, deeper down. They found like a chariot recently, a couple of years ago, and under something they've already excavated, and found like a stable. So it's like they knew something was there, but they're just like, oh, cool, stable, moving on. And so they're kind of returning to places they've already excavated a little bit to see, is there something we've missed? But as our tour guide mentioned too, it's more about giving something for the future. Like as soon as you expose something, it kind of is all of a sudden on a timer, if that makes sense. Like it starts ticking down. Herculaneum has this problem immensely, I know, with pigeons. Pigeons pooping apparently is a massive issue.
Isn't it like something in the poop? It's like the acid or something?
Somehow it's reacting, and it eats away at the stone. And I think they also have things really well preserved in wood that have like sort of petrified.
Right.
And that's being destroyed. So they have a whole issue. Pompeii, I guess, doesn't have the pigeon problem. I don't know why. I don't know if it's like better food in the actual town of Pompeii to eat, so they don't end up in the archaeological site. But they are not like racing to uncover anything, basically.
Right.
They're just like, we're going to uncover it over the next 100 years and over the next 200 years.
But as long as it's in the earth, it is at its, didn't Francesco say something like that? It's, as long as it's there, it's preserved.
Exactly.
To it's safe where it is.
It's not degrading, basically.
Exactly.
But it will as soon as it's exposed
Exactly.
to air and moisture. So that all being said, is you might, again, we keep saying this, but you might hear in the news about, oh, they found more things, and that will potentially continue. There might be another moratorium on it. Who knows? But it also means that if you have gone to Pompeii before, like us 10 years ago or more, then it might not be the same Pompeii you remember. Part of it is just they clearly put some more money into pathways, walkways, the entrance area, more ramps, more stairs up and down places that are a little bit more established and easier to navigate, I would say. It felt a lot more of like, oh, this isn't just like, a dirt path and then a
Right.
guardrail. This is a fully functional path. They built a lot of these really beautiful steel and glass sort of walkways over, as we talked about, the tepidarium and the frigidarium, so you can kind of explore it from the inside without actually touching anything, which I thought was beautiful. So it does seem like they put a lot of money into the the tourists' experience,
Yeah.
but in a way to preserve it.
Speaking of which, I'm going to put a link to it. There is a Pompeii for All sort of project, which means that they have put effort into putting in ramps and making it more accessible for people in wheelchairs. And they also have, I don't know if they have ASL guides, but they certainly have Italian sign language guides available for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. So if you need extra services, just check out that link in the description.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And that is everything I had to, well, I don't know, riff on about Pompeii, I guess.
Yeah, and in the next episode, we're going to tell you more of the practical things.
Yes.
How to get there, the complicated ticket. It's not complicated tickets, but they're very different tickets you can get to different things. So we're going to go into all the practicalities of that.
And with that being said, thank you all so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thanks for listening. Tanti abbracci.